Hello class, it's Professor Streeter, and in this video I'm going to talk about a rubric that I made, sort of basic rubric for how I assess your argument summaries. Your first two homeworks in this class have been, you've been asked to summarize in a paragraph, or 250 words, someone else's argument. And so the second one is due on Sunday. The first one was due last week. I assigned grades, but I didn't comment. So this rubric is meant to help you think about how to interpret the grade that you earned and what I'm looking for in your argument summaries and what you can do to improve them moving forward. So that's the goal. And then at the end, I will turn to the quiz, the second quiz, the multiple choice questions on Heathwood's faring well and getting what you want. That might be in the second video, but if I have time, I'll ship to that. Otherwise, there'll be a second video in which I walk you through the answers to the questions to that quiz. Okay, so let's. I'm going to put myself in the bottom of the screen here, and this is the rubric I shared with you. I'm going to put full screen here. And as you can see, I've laid out in the first part of this document the four things that I am looking for in your argument summaries. First, that you have identified the central claim. So in this case, Heathwood's central claim. You know, there might be more than one central claim that you think Heathwood is making. In that case, I'm asking you to identify what you take to be the central claim. Secondly, that you've identified at least one of the central reasons given in defense of that claim. So, you know, he spends some time trying to motivate his argument for the desire satisfaction theory, and what he means by that. He spends some time trying to explain why he supports a subjectivist approach to welfare. So where does he do that? And then thirdly, that you not only identify the central claim or central conclusion of the article, and the reasons given in support of that claim, but that you explain the connection. And that's the third component of the summary, and very important, obviously. So it's one thing to identify the claims, it's another thing to explain the connection between them. And so, for example, by giving examples, by giving specific examples, by clearly defining the terms that you need to understand in order to see the connection between the central claim and the reasons given in support of it, by explaining or making nuanced distinctions, nuanced sort of fine-grained or detailed distinctions between central concepts that are needed, again, to understand both the central claim that Heathwood is making and the reasons he gives in support of that claim. Okay, so that's the third component. That's the third thing I'm looking for in your argument summaries. And then finally, that you have cited, either directly or indirectly, relevant passages from the text, in this case Heathwood's article, to support your interpretation of his argument. Okay. Notice that I'm not looking for, in the summary, I'm not looking for your opinion or your response to his argument or what you think of it, but just your interpretation of what you think he's doing. So a grade of A means that you did all of those things well in your summary. And there are, there's a spectrum of, A minus to full A. Obviously, the difference between those are things maybe we can talk about individually in meetings. But a B means that one of these three things, you didn't do, or you didn't do clearly at all. Either you missed the central claim, or you didn't sort of identify the central reasons in support of it, or you didn't explain the connection very well, or you didn't bother to cite either directly or indirectly passages from the text. Again, you don't need a bunch of quotations in the summary. That's one way to cite. You could also just paraphrase or indirectly reference something that Heathwood says, but then include the page reference. Right? This is what I'm indirectly citing or paraphrasing. All right. So I do want to see page references. Okay. A grade of C means that you only really did one or two of these things, and a failing grade means you didn't really do any. You wrote a paragraph, but you didn't really do any of these things, or didn't do them well enough to earn a passing grade. Okay, so I've given you two examples. These are anonymous, but these are from fellow students. The first is just the first. I know there was two parts to the homework. I asked you to write a summary and then to answer some questions. This is just the first part. So this is a student's summary. The student also submitted answers to those questions, but I didn't include that. So this student begins with what I've called a skeleton argument, and you certainly don't need to do this, but I thought this was nice. The student started with trying to break down a skeleton argument. You might number the skeleton argument instead of just using bullet points to show the flow. But anyway, we have like this imaginary Amanda seeks to improve her quality of life. The second sort of idea is that, or claim is that X would improve Amanda's quality of life if Amanda desires X to happen or has an interest in X, right? It would improve her quality of life. Therefore, Amanda would benefit from X and improve her quality of life if she gets what she desired. In other words, and this is the kind of the conclusion that this student sees. If this argument is true, if this little skeleton argument about Amanda is a good argument, right? If Amanda would benefit from X and only if she satisfies her desire for something that she has an interest in, then that means that the subjectivist theory is true. And that's what I liked about this little skeleton argument, that it identified the kind of purpose of the article. You know, Heathwood is trying to defend subjectivism and about welfare. And so everything that he's doing in his essay is aimed at that goal, defending a subjectivist account of welfare. And so while this is not a perfectly constructed skeleton argument, it kind of gets us to the main point of Heathwood's article. And then we have the students' sort of three short paragraphs. I think this is something maybe that could have been written as one full paragraph, but that's not such a big deal. The above argument, okay, is an example of the argument proposed in Heathwood's theory of welfare, as discussed in his work. So first, nicely putting it in the context, you know, we're talking about Heathwood, and we're referencing this skeleton argument as an example of something that Heathwood is doing in his paper. You know, it might a better thing to do is actually give the title of Heathwood's article. That would be an even better thing to do than just mentioning the author. The theory is of the view that something of intrinsic value that we have interest in or desire in is what can be of any benefit to our lives. That's not as clear a sentence as I'd like to see, and I think this would be a better summary if the student had said what they mean by intrinsic value and contrasted it with instrumental value more carefully. Okay, but what comes out here is this idea that that something has benefits us only insofar as we have an interest in it or a desire for it. So in the above premises, Amanda seeks to improve her quality of life, but what could help improve her quality of life can only do so if she has an interest or desire in such activity. Again, that idea could be better expressed, but I think it comes across, right? That what would improve Amanda's quality of life is getting something that she has a desire for, an interest in, right? So that something is considered to have intrinsic value, does not mean that it would benefit Amanda unless it's something that she had a desire for. Therefore, okay, as the conclusion states, Amanda's life can only be improved if she has a positive attitude toward such an activity, and such a positive attitude is seen as the desire or attraction to something. Nice point there where here the student does what I was suggesting in explaining the connection between the main claim of the article, that the subjectivist theory of welfare is true, is the best way to go. How does Heathwood support that? With something like the Amanda example, right? I like that this student kind of constructs her own example, but it might be useful also to relate that to an example in Heathwood. If this was a slightly longer paragraph, the student could have done that. But we have this clear explanation of, or attempt to explain what a positive attitude is, right? Or how Heathwood understands the term desire, right? Not just a behavioral sense that like I do something, and right, that doesn't follow from the fact that I do something that I want it or that I desire it in the sense that I'm attracted to it. So the student again does a nice job here of clarifying defining how Heathwood understands desire. Okay? And subjectivists are of the view that to be well off has to do with the attitude towards something and not the nature of the thing itself. Okay, good. That's, again, a nice attempt to, and here we have a reference to Heathwood and a page reference. So it's not a direct quote, but it's an indirect reference to Heathwood. And this is where the student is distinguishing between subjectivism and objectivism. Again, it might have been a good idea. It might have been a stronger summary if the student had mentioned objectivism, but the student is doing a good job trying to explain what subjectivism is in this context. In other words, it doesn't matter what X is to Amanda as long as she desires it. The satisfaction of the desire is what's important, right? With respect to her, the question of whether it benefits her or contributes to her good. So that last sentence, I think, does a nice job of capturing the central claim. Again, the student could have done more here with number 3 in the rubric, explaining the connection between the central claim and the reasons given in support of that claim. There could have been more references to the text, although there was one. Yeah, so I think 3 and 4 are things that this student could have done better at. But and I should say, in the answers to the questions that the student submitted, the student did address some of those issues. So the student did make more references in part 2, and did go into a more explanation of the connection between the central claim and the reasons in support of that claim. Okay, so that's why this overall this assignment earned an A. But I would say the summary itself is like a B/A, but again, the student did enough in the questions in part 2 to address these, to kind of accomplish these 4 tasks that I've laid out in the rubric. Okay, the second submission then. An objective theory of welfare is that something intrinsically valuable is beneficial to an individual even if they don't like, want, or care about it. I like this opening, a reference directly to Heathwood, and a reference to the theory that Heathwood is rejecting, okay? Things like health, freedom, so putting it into context, that's nice. Then we get to Heathwood. Heathwood holds a subjectivist view. Here's a contrast, a clear distinction between an objective theory and a subjective view, okay? When it comes to welfare. So here the student is identifying, again, his central claim, right, to defend subjectivism about welfare. Another quote, so putting us in the context of the text, his viewpoint is, and here's an attempt to interpret the quote, how could something possibly be beneficial in our lives if we didn't even want it? Now, I think that would be a better sentence if it wasn't put in the form of a question, but actually sort of make a statement, right, to state Heathwood's view, but it contains an implied statement. If I don't particularly care for being happy, how will happiness benefit me if I see it as irrelevant to my well-being? Those are all good questions. Again, I think it would be a stronger summary here if we kind of moved from the question to a statement of Heathwood's view. He sees your individual welfare as the engagement of an activity that you are interested in, what you feel benefits you, what is meaningful to you personally, stating that being good at something doesn't mean it's good for the individual. Okay, that's the place where the student, I think, tries to state Heathwood's main claim or view. That's a nice sentence. And then we move to, okay, support, right? So again, coming back here, what are some of the reasons for accepting that claim? All right, well, the Bundy example is one of the central examples. Okay, so that's a good move on the part of the student to move to the Bundy example. It provides one of the reasons or one of the ways that Heathwood goes about defending subjectivism. And then the next paragraph, he expresses that sometimes our desires aren't based on informed thinking. Here, the student is doing a nice job of addressing some of the objections to subjectivism, okay, and how Heathwood responds to those objections. And so that's a way of explaining the connection between, right, his, the reasons for the reasons that he's offering and the claim itself, right? By considering the objections, the student is doing a nice job here of explaining how everything holds together, and also just explaining in more detail what the argument is. When you look at some objections to the argument, you have to explain the nuances of the argument, make more distinctions, define your concepts more carefully. So some of the things that I mentioned in the rubric are happening in this paragraph. Okay, so a use of an example there goes to the cherry pie example. Okay, so this is a way of of showing that, right? I mean, sometimes our